Well, as many of you know, in the summer of 2020, in June of 2020, I took a walk, a few 100-mile walk from Indiana to Kansas. And as I was on day 3 of that walk, my feet began to really hurt and they began to blister. And I don't know if you've had blisters on your feet before or if it's been a while, but these blisters started to grow and my feet really started hurting. And all I could think about was, with every step, and the pain was that I was only on day 3 of a 21-day experience. Now, that's not a comforting thought, to think I got to go through 18 more days of all this agony. And it's hard to imagine right now, January in Michigan, but it was hot and humid and dusty and windy. And I'm outside, right outside of Logansport, Indiana, and I'm having serious thoughts about giving up. Because the pain got so intense, and with each step it got worse. And I followed all the things you're supposed to do. I stopped every hour, I changed socks, I put powder on my feet. I did everything you're supposed to do, and nothing was working. And it got so bad, and this is kind of gross, but like the blisters were so big that I could feel them moving around as I'm taking steps. You know what I mean? It was gross. And finally, I got up at dusk that morning and got an early start, even before the dawn, and was a few miles in, and I stopped, and I really didn't know what to do. I was afraid. I was afraid of the failure of not completing this. Here I am on day 3, and I just don't know what to do. And so I pulled out my phone, and I was going to Logansport that day, and I just looked up churches, and the first church that popped up there, I called it. Now, I called it before it was even open. I called it, if I remember right around 7 a.m., and it wasn't open yet. And so I sat there under a tree just wondering what I was going to do. And I left a message. Eventually, the pastor called me back. His name was Zach, and he said, and I said, hey, I'm taking this walk, and I'm wondering if I could stay at maybe your church or some place I could stay tonight. And he seemed to know who I was, and long story short, he did know who I was. We went to the same college, Indiana Wesleyan, and I'm older than him, but he recognized my name, knew who I was, and he said, yeah, you can come by. And I guess he must have heard it in my voice, because he said, do you want me to come pick you up? And I was thinking, how in the world does he know that I would really actually appreciate that? But I thought to myself, if I'm doing that, I'm kind of surrendering a bit of this journey. But I will tell you that the pain was so intense that after I kind of stammered around with an answer, I said, you know what, actually that would be really nice if you'd come pick me up. So he drove and picked me up that morning and took me into the church. And they had a little guest house next door. And Zach and his wife, Lindy, Zmara, they took care of me for the next day. They took me to the store and bought bandages for my feet, which I didn't have that I needed. They fed me. They allowed me to stay there that night. And they really took care of me and just helped me get literally back on my feet to keep going. And I've thought about where I would be if not for them. I'm not sure how the end of the story would have happened, because I was at a point where I just needed someone else in my life to help me. And I didn't even really want to admit it. But now that I look back, without a doubt, I needed them in my life at that moment in time. And I'm so grateful that they went beyond themselves to serve and to help me at that moment of need that I had. And that's what I want to talk to you about today from our readings and our reset guide, is what it means to serve and to think about the needs of other people. And I want to bring out some people from Daybreak that serve around here. And I want you to hear a little bit of their hearts and who they are and what they do here at Daybreak. So I'm going to ask them to come out. And these are people that serve faithfully here at Daybreak. And I want you to just get their heart and hear a little bit about what they do here at Daybreak and why they do it. And so there's a lot of great, wonderful people here at Daybreak that serve in many different capacities. And this is the man, the myth, the legend, Tim Way. Everybody say good morning to Tim. The myth. That beard's looking pretty good too, by the way. I like it. So You need to let it grow a little bit, though. It's okay. We'll talk about that later.
My wife won't let me.
We're getting distracted. Did you say your wife won't let you? Well, mine won't either, but I still do it. It's okay. You can do it. You got my permission. Your pastor said it's okay.
I'll tell her that.
She's right over there. She's not looking very happy. Okay. Forget that. Do what she says. Forget everything else I just said.
She's nodding.
So, Tim, tell us where you serve here at Daybreak and why do you do it?
Well, I do several things, but I thought I'd talk about two. One's a newer thing, and that is I'm a host on Daybreak Live. And I love doing that because it's really a service for people that aren't able to come into the building, or people that are traveling or whatever. We had one of our elders last week that was sick and tuned in and said, man, it's just nice to be able to be a part of the service. And I love interacting with people online, and I really love it when people have prayer requests or when people give their hearts to Christ online. We've had a number of them do that, and that's really cool. Another thing I've done for about the last 25 years is lead a small group, and that just really cranks me up. We've got 13 people in our small group, and I think it's vital because I think small groups are probably the best way for people to really dig deep into their faith. So, and we've seen a number of people just really grow exponentially in their faith. So I think it's very important.
Yeah, Tim does so many things. We thank you. Your fingerprints, you and your wife, are all over this church, and we're grateful for that. Thank you, Tim. So, Lisa. This is Lisa. Everyone say hello to Lisa.
Hi.
And step forward here for a second. So, Lisa, where do you serve, and why do you serve here at Daybreak?
All right. So I serve backstage, like back here, and then I sit at the front of the house there, and I tell you what to do.
That's right. Man, there's a lot of people around here that do that.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm sure.
You always give me good advice.
I try.
Yeah.
Well, I do it because Daybreak changed my life, and part of that was watching what was going on here with like the band and, the mix of secular music with, Christian music. That really spoke to me because I love live music, and I just kind of wanted to be a part of that, and I felt like this, would be natural. So, and I hope it changes other people's lives.
That's right. She does a great job. Thank you, Lisa. Awesome. Okay. Always with the fresh haircut. This is Nathan.
Always.
Who cuts your hair, by the way?
My wife.
Allison, yeah, she does a good job.
She does a great job.
Good. I always like to do this when I see you. Okay, Nathan. So where do you serve and why?
So I serve in Daybreak students on Sunday nights, and 20 years ago, I myself was a student at Flood, and there was a group of guys that took the time to invest in me and my friends, and some of them are still here today. Nick Jennison didn't have a mustache back then, so it wasn't as creepy.
Yeah. Hey,
Mark Decker in the back was actually my small group leader, so he was truly doing the Lord's work.
That's right. That's right. That's awesome.
But these guys didn't just, tell me what I needed to do to follow Jesus. They set an example by the way they lived their lives. And, I know how important it was for me to have adults that were there to lead me and encourage me in my faith. So I have the opportunity now to do that for the next generation.
That's right. And I've said this long before I became pastor at Daybreak. I think the greatest group of volunteers that I know of greatest volunteer team is in our student ministries. And we're grateful for Jason and Kyle and John as well and their team. So thank you. Mike. This is Mike. Everyone say hello to Mike. And Mike, what do you do here and why?
So I'm director of security, and I do that, and I do a little bit on the side. I help Joe out right now with a little bit of maintenance stuff around the building. We got to fill in there, so.
Yeah. And tell me what is it that motivates you to do those things?
So before I retired, I started looking into things, how the world's changing, not for the better. And after I retired, I met with Wes and Claudia, met with Todd Hostetler, and we decided we needed a security team in the church, which is bad to say, but you do. So get a team together, and we watch over everybody. And the main thing is watching over the kids. So, and just keeping everybody safe.
And you don't realize it, but there's a whole team behind the scenes here. Anytime this building is open, to make sure it's secure, make sure our kids, our families, all of us are safe and taken care of, and there's great systems and procedures, things that you wouldn't maybe normally think about, but Mike and that team does a great job, so we appreciate that. Can we just say thank you to everyone here for sharing? Lisa, what do I do next? Okay, sermon. Okay, I got it. I can do that. A question to think about with serving is this: what is not right in the world, and what are you going to do about it? That's a question you should consider. And for the next few minutes, what I want you to think about is what is not right, something that you noticed in the world. And I want you to particularly think about Daybreak for a minute. Now, some of you are newer to Daybreak. Some of you are guests, and you're here. And we're so glad that you're here with us in the house and online. Those of you that maybe are a little bit more connected, or as we heard the stories earlier, Jamie and Catherine that are newer to Daybreak and are taking steps. For some of you here, your next step might be to find a way that you can serve here at Daybreak. And that's going to be my appeal. I'm just going to be straight up with you here for a minute as your pastor. My appeal is going to be, where is it that you could get plugged in and serve your summer? Because there's lots of needs. Now, the world has many, many needs. And Daybreak has needs. And the world is a place that we need to roll up our sleeves and get involved as Christ followers, because God is doing his work everywhere. And it's our privilege to be a part of it. And I got to see something really unique this last week. The last week of January, every year, my wife and I travel to wherever this meeting is. It's different places every year. This year it was in Hollywood. I just got back Friday, and Ariana wasn't able to go this year. But I want you to see some images of this trip that I had. So I'm a board member of the National Day of Prayer, and we're a part of something called the National Prayer Committee with our ministry with Never the Same and Claim Your Campus. And some of you, when I say that, you know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to explain it, but I want you to see some things here. You know, we were right in Hollywood. I want you to notice, like, first of all, this is the center of Scientology. If you don't know what Scientology is, it's a really evil thing that's gripping the hearts of people all over the world. But it's based right there. There's so many things happening in this city of Los Angeles and Hollywood. You'll notice that panel group up there on that picture on the upper right there. There's a makeup artist, an actor, a producer, and a stuntman. We got to hear from people behind the scenes in Hollywood. And I will tell you that, you know, a lot of people that are Christ followers would say Hollywood is evil. We shouldn't be a part of it. We shouldn't have anything to do with it because of what's coming out of there. And I will tell you this, that God has his secret agents everywhere. And all through the Hollywood network, there are people that love Jesus that are making a difference. When you think about a person like a makeup artist who is sitting in front of a face for 6, 8, sometimes 10 or 12 hours, and the opportunity that she and others like her that love Jesus have to minister to someone face to face, that you'd get no one else, you'd get nowhere else. But hearing people that are in the acting, if you see down here on the bottom left, this young man's name's Hiram, and he just finished up last couple episodes of a show called This Is Us, if you are familiar with that show, and talking about what it means to be a person of faith. Now, right next to that, you'll see me, and I'm sitting on a couch. Now, I've heard, supposedly, this I guess it's true, it's what they said, that this couch was on Friends. So there you go. I was sitting on the Friends couch. Not like the Friends, not like the main, but one of the couches. So I thought that was kind of cool. And you see some worship gatherings, and you'll see there's a lot of homeless. There's a lot of things happening and stirring in this city. But as I am coming back from just a few days, I'm filled up because I see what God's doing around the world. And I don't want you to lose heart. You know, it can be easy to look at places like Hollywood or our schools, or just pick an arena or an avenue or a venue in this world and think, is God really doing anything? And I want to tell you, yes, he is. And it's pretty exciting what he is doing. And to see these people's heart to serve there in Hollywood is pretty amazing. So we're going to read today from day 4 of our Reset Guide, and it's in John chapter 13. And John gives us an account of the life and teachings of Jesus. John was a disciple. And if you're familiar with this, you know that there are 4 different accounts of the life and teachings of Jesus. They're called the Gospels. It's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. John is the 4th one, and is actually written last. So that is in chronological order here. John wrote this probably at least a couple decades after Jesus was on the earth, after he lived and died on the cross and was resurrected. And as John is looking back, what's interesting about what we're going to read today is that John gives us a story that none of the other gospel accounts have. Now, some of these gospel accounts overlap in their content. This is a very unique story, an event that happened the night before Jesus died on the cross. So in John 13, it says this: "It was just before the Passover festival, and Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and he was returning to God. So he got up from the meal. He took off his outer clothing and he wrapped a towel around his waist. And after that he poured water into a basin and he began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him." If you go down to verse 12. "When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and he returned to his place. 'Do you understand what I have done for you?' he asked. 'You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that's what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them." So Jesus here at the very beginning, John gives us this insight about Jesus understanding the power and authority that he had been given. So Jesus here knew who he was. When Jesus was in this particular situation, listen to what John says there. I want to read it again. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power. Just want you to think about John as an older man now, writing these words and remembering this unforgettable scene with Jesus. And he's thinking back. And he's thinking about what was going on in Jesus' mind. And maybe he had the opportunity to ask him. But here he said that Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and he was returning to God. John there is going out of his way to tell us that Jesus here is thinking about who he was. And he knew who he was. Now you may think that's an obvious statement, but Jesus often, we find at times, would say, "Father, show me the way I should go." In fact, a little bit later on, Jesus is praying the night before his crucifixion, a few hours after this, and he's praying, "Father, take this cup from me." In other words, you're leading me to a place that's really difficult for me to go, and I don't want to do it, but I will. I'll surrender myself to you. But here is Jesus, knowing who he was. And then when you see what he does, when you see his response to that understanding, that knowledge, that he says, he knew that the Father had put all things under his power. And so as a result of that, John says, so he gets up from the table and he wraps a towel around his waist, and then he goes person by person to each one of his disciples with a basin of water and a towel, and he washes their feet. So he knew who he was. And yet, even with his knowing, even with his understanding that he was the Son of God, that he was God in human form, that he was among us, he chose to use his identity to serve. And here's what I know about you. If you're a follower of Jesus, you've been stamped with the royalty of God. You've been given the authority of God in this world. And when we think about authority, we think about maybe our boss at work or someone that's always telling us what to do. But it's more than that. Because with humility, there's a responsibility to serve. If you're a follower of Jesus, when it means you have authority, that authority is not to be used to lord it over to people or to be cruel or mean or abusive or manipulative or selfish. But that is meant to be used to serve others. Because if you know who you are, you know that you are a follower of Jesus, and Jesus was a servant. I heard recently someone say that no one has the power to make you feel inferior to someone else but you. Some of you in this world are walking around, you feel inferior to others. Well, I'm not good enough. or I'll never measure up. And you listen to that voice in your head that says, I'm just not what I need to be. And you know what? There's truth in that. We're always going forward. We're always progressing. When we follow Jesus, we're always getting better. God is always shaping us and molding us. But let me remind you of who you are today. That you're made in the image of God, that you're his child, that you're bought with a price, that you're a new creation in Christ, that you're his son, you're his daughter. You have everything you need for life and godliness in this world. Remember who you are. Now, Jesus here chose to do this, and he served with humility. Jesus, in this particular moment, I believe left nothing to chance. Jesus, in the other accounts of this event, of this, what's called the Last Supper, if you're familiar with that term, the last time he was sitting down with his disciples before he died, it says that Jesus sent 2 disciples into the city and said, there's going to be someone there waiting for you. And just tell them, I sent you, and all the arrangements have been made. Jesus made all the arrangements because he knew it was the end, and he left nothing to chance. Jesus was not random in what he did. When you read, a shallow version of the Gospels, you may think, well, Jesus just kind of randomly walked from place to place, and whoever kind of came up and interacted with him, that's kind of how his life went. But he was reactive. But let me tell you, more than reactive, he was proactive. Jesus knew what he was doing. He knew where he was going, and he was on mission. And here he is. I want you to put yourself in his place and know that it's the last moments that you have with your closest friends and family in your life, your closest relationships around you. And then you know it's going to be the end, and they don't, but you do. This is all going on in Jesus' mind, and he left nothing to chance. Now, here's what we know from one of the other Gospels, is that as they were there, gathered around, the disciples, and almost certainly they were all younger, probably late teens, and they started an argument, a conversation about who was the best in the room. That'd be interesting to be sitting there, wouldn't it, and to hear this conversation. Well, one would be going, hey, I'm better. I did more miracles than you did. Or I was with Jesus up on the mountain, you guys. I mean, Jesus invited me to go there, and he didn't invite you guys. I'm sure they had all these reasons. Now, this isn't in the Bible, but I'm going to give you my opinion and my speculation here. My opinion is that Jesus strategically did not have what would have been a very common thing to have at this gathering, and that was a servant that was there to wash the feet of the guests. That was a very common thing. It was ordinary because walking around in sandals and dirt roads all day, your feet got pretty dirty. So it was just one of those customary things that happened. And for a dinner like this, there would have normally been a person there, but there wasn't, in my opinion. And I think it was because Jesus wanted to give one last impression upon these young men. Now, I've just imagined in my mind that Jesus arranged for that person not to be there just to see how they might respond. But regardless, they're having this conversation, this argument. And in the middle of this argument, Jesus just gets up, I imagine probably without even saying much, and he wraps this towel around his waist, and he begins to humbly wash their feet. He begins to serve. And my friends, that is a picture of the God that we love, that he is willing to serve. It's been said throughout history that no king has ever sacrificed himself for his servants, but always asked his servants to sacrifice their life for him, except for one, and that's King Jesus, that he gave his life for us, that he served with humility. And then Jesus at the end, he says, he got up, I imagine it was dead quiet. And after he had washed all their feet, he sat back down. And then he says, do you understand what I've done for you? Jesus then invited them to follow his example. Jesus said, if you want to be like me, then wash people's feet. Now, he wasn't just saying there that necessarily in just a literal sense. Jesus is saying, if you want to be like me, then be willing to wash other people's feet. Be willing to be a servant. And then he says, if you'll be blessed. You'll be blessed if you do this. if you're willing to follow Jesus. Because here's the thing, you were designed to serve. There's a famous violinist, and upon his death, his request was, I want this violin to be donated to my hometown, never to be played again. I don't know if he realized this or not, but that particular type of wood that this violin was made from stays in better condition if it's continually and daily used. And if it's not used, it wears out, it deteriorates, and it disintegrates. And that's exactly what happened. This violin that was donated sat in a case, never to be played again, and it deteriorated. And I would tell you it's the same for you. That if you're not being used, if you're not allowing your gifts to be poured out outside of yourself, you're truly missing when Jesus said, you will be blessed if you do this. Now, you may have noticed over here, we got some pretty fancy water here. And as I think about life, I think about all that we've filled our lives up with, all that God's put in there, the gifts, the talents, the abilities, the things that you do, the things that you can offer to the world. And yet most people that don't ever see beyond themselves, they keep everything in that container and they just try to keep filling it. And they want to live a life where they just say, I just want the best. I want the best vacations. I want the best house. I want everything that life has to offer. And they just try to fill themselves up with the world without ever thinking beyond themselves. And here's what I've noticed, is that the more you think beyond yourself, the more you'll be satisfied. The world will tell you that if you just focus on yourself, make yourself happy, do whatever you want. And that's why the world says, do whatever you want. Hey, you know what? If you want to do this and if it feels right and you want to do it and it appeals to whatever you think makes you feel good, then do it. That's why people look at Christianity and look at faith and they go, I don't want to do that because then I don't get to do what I want. But here's what's missing in that equation is they don't understand that life is not what fills you up. Life happens when we pour ourselves out to others. And so when you think about your life and you think about the outside world and you think, if I could just take my life and just pour it out for the benefit of my King, for the benefit of the world. I think about some of you here and all the talents and the abilities that you have, and it's not being leveraged for kingdom purposes. And I think if you could understand that when you empty your life, it will actually be filled up. There's a paradox here that if your life is empty, it can become full. But if you try to fill your life with everything else, what you'll find is your heart will be empty. I've told people that often, that when you walk into Daybreak, if you're a follower of Jesus, if you come to Daybreak and say, what can Daybreak do for me? If that's where you stay forever, you will be unsatisfied. Because Daybreak will never be enough for you. It's only when you pour yourselves out that you find that your life can be filled up. So if this is what you have to offer, I just want you to imagine this representing the goodness and the grace and the life and all God has to offer to fill you up. If this represents all the fullness of life that Jesus is talking about, if this represents Jesus saying, you'll be blessed if you follow my example, then there's no way you can experience this until you give yourself away and you pour yourself out. One of our readings this week was Philippians 2. In humility, consider others better than yourselves. And so I want to ask you, particularly those of you that are part of Daybreak, where are you serving? Some of you might be just puzzled and go, I see things that just aren't the way I would have them. They're not right. And I would just ask you again, what do you see that's not right? And what are you going to do about it? As you look around, particularly Daybreak today, and I'll tell you why I'm focused just on Daybreak this morning. Because people's lives are changing. This church is filling up with people. This church is filling up with children. This church is filling up with students. This church is being filled up with people that are searching and hungry for God. This church is filling up with people that are saying, what is my next step? What can I do? I mean, today we're seeing 6 examples of people that are taking that next step. And there's so many more, and you are needed in the cause. And so I'm asking you today to consider, what are you doing to pour yourself out, to empty your life so that God can fill you up and you can experience life to the full? Because some of you here, maybe you've been around Daybreak for a long time and you've kept that seat warm that you sit in every Sunday. But have you offered your gifts? Have you done something? And you say, Jeff, I don't know what to do. Well, start somewhere. Ask. Stop into the lounge. Have conversations. Get a hold of us and say, I have an idea. Because there's lots of work to be done. And that's my challenge for you this morning. I'd love to pray for you as we close today. Father, thank you for these moments. Thank you for what we were able to experience today. Hearing these stories that were shared of lives that were changed. Hearing about people's hearts that were touched. People sharing about how you've done so much for them. And Father, we put ourselves right now in this moment in the place of those disciples in that room that we just read about in John 13, and as they receive that act of humble service, Lord, we have received the same. You've been so good to us. And God, we can't help but think, how can we not serve? Lord, I thank you for each and every person that has a servant's mentality when they go to work and to school and at home, and they're just pouring themselves out. Lord, I pray that they would sense your favor, and I pray for my brothers and sisters here that have been a part of Daybreak, whether for a long time or a short time, that haven't found their place to serve. I pray that today would push them to a next step. Lord, that they could find fulfillment in this life, that they wouldn't believe any longer, maybe if they have, that it's just about all that they receive. Lord, it's about what they give. That's how our lives are filled up. Lord, thank you for your word today. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. It's been so great to be with you, and I hope to see you next week. You're dismissed.